guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and I'm going to be doing a beauty retouching tutorial in Affinity Photo. Now, for those of you who don't know, I have done 1 or 2 videos in Affinity Photo before on my channel, but I do want to start doing more in this program because I really do believe in it as a retouching or an editing program. I think that it really does stand up to Adobe, and for those of you who may not be able to afford an Adobe subscription per se, this program is a lot more affordable overall as you can buy it outright. And I do feel like it's got many features that are super beneficial for a lot of retouchers and photographers out there. So I definitely want to showcase more of its features and really show you guys how you can use it professionally to edit your photos. So today we're going to be retouching this beauty image here, and I'm going to be starting off in Affinity Photo's develop section, which is more or less for the raw developing portion of the editing process. So this is the first step to editing an image in Affinity Photo. If you have a raw image, it does have its own raw processing feature. So that is what we're going to do first off, and we're going to go over here towards this tab here. Now I'm going to start off on basic, and you'll see that it looks very similar to other programs like Camera Raw, or if you've been using Capture One or Lightroom, you'll see that there's very similar sliders here. So we're going to start off with exposure. I believe this image needs to be a little bit brighter, and I really want it to have that warm summery glow. That's kind of the vibe that I want to go for with this image. It's all about the skin, so I really want to showcase that in this particular image. So I'm just going to bump up that exposure a little bit. Now the black point here is more or less for the shadows, and it's also like the dark blacks in the image. So you'll see there that can really be lightened up or darkened depending on what you want. I'm not going to do too much with it. I feel like we'll kind of move it back down to around here. I want a little bit of contrast and depth to the image. I don't want it to be too flat looking. The brightness I might just up a little bit too, just for the skin, to really showcase the detail and freckles. So we'll just pump that up just a little bit, but not too much. And the cool thing about this is you can actually tick this box here in Affinity Photo, and it will actually show you what it looks like before and after, step by step. So then we're going to go down to enhance here, and we're going to just shift the clarity up a little bit because, as I said, I want a lot of detail in this image. I really want the skin to shine in all aspects, and I want the detail to really be noticeable. So I'm just going to move that up just a little bit. And saturation and vibrance, we're not going to tweak too much now. I prefer to do this more so when I am figuring out more of a color grade for the image in a later stage of the process. You can also alter your white balance just below here. I might actually just push it a little bit warmer, just a little bit, because I really want that summery kind of feel to come through with it. And you've also got a shadows and highlights tab here, which I'm not really going to alter today. And then you've got your profiles down the bottom here, which at the moment it is an sRGB output profile. However, you can change this to Adobe RGB depending on what you're working with. I prefer to usually edit using Adobe RGB in Photoshop or whatever program that I'm using, and then export as an sRGB image. But today we're just going to stick with this. And then all we have to do to process that raw image is go up to the top left corner here and click on develop. So you can see that we've just made some really minimal enhancements here, but that's pretty much my raw process anyway. I just mainly like to adjust the exposure and adjust some of the clarity as well. So we're going to go develop. And then we've got our photo here now in the main panel, the main processing section. So we are going to start off with some healing tools and then move on to dodge and burn. So for you guys that have seen my editing tutorials before, you'll know that that's pretty much always how I start off with retouching an image. I prefer to start off in programs like this with retouching skin and then moving on to a color grade if I'm doing it all in the one program. However, if I'm using Capture One or Lightroom beforehand, I usually actually do my color grades in those programs and then move on to skin retouching in Photoshop or Affinity Photo, depending on what I'm using. So preferably today, because we are working all in Affinity Photo from start to finish, I'm going to start off with skin retouching. So we're going to go over to layers here, just in this window here, and we're going to start creating some layers. So first off, I'm going to create a group, and I'm just going to name this healing. And then I'm going to add an empty pixel layer just underneath that. So I'm going to move that into that group, the healing group. And then we're going to rename this particular layer Healing Tools. And I've just moved the background layer out of that group as well, so they're separate. So we've got our healing group, and I'm going to create another group now, and this one's going to be Dodge and Burn. We're going to move the background out as well. We want to separate those. I'm then going to move this one up to the top above healing, because we'll start with healing and then move on to dodge and burn. But we're going to just create our dodge and burn layers now. So I'm going to add 2 adjustment layers in there, which the button for that is just down here. And we're going to click on curves. This first one is going to be the dodge layer, which will be the brighter layer. So we're going to do that, move that line up there, and hold down Control or Command I on the keyboard. And then I'm going to rename this layer Dodge and move that into the Dodge and Burn group. And we're going to add another curves adjustment layer. So this one's going to be the burn layer. We're going to move the line right down so it's dark, hold down Control or Command I on the keyboard, and then rename this layer Burn. So now we've got all of our skin retouching layers and groups. We're going to go down to healing tools first, and this is where we're going to use the healing tools to just pick up any makeup fallout or any little blemishes that would be easier to remove using a healing tool versus dodge and burn. So I'm going to move over to the healing tools over here, and we're going to zoom in just a second, and I'm going to be using first off the healing brush tool just up here. So now we're going to zoom in. And first we're going to make sure that the source is going to be switched from up here to current layer and below. Then we're going to hold down Alt on the keyboard and we're going to sample nearby this little area here. And then we're going to just run the tool over those little bits of makeup fallout and blemishes. So it's very similar to Photoshop in the way that some of the healing tools work in that program. And for now, I'm just going to continue running this over the little hairs that we just want to remove here. And as I said, that makeup fallout and any little blemishes that we want to remove in this stage of the editing process. So remember to keep sampling and make sure that you're doing that so you're not just getting or sampling the same area over and over, because that can make things start to look a bit strange on the skin. Okay, so after we have done that and mainly gone around with the healing tools to make sure we've sort of removed any of that extra texture that we didn't want on the skin, you can actually turn this checkbox on and off over here just to show what we've actually done to the skin. You can see that there's quite a bit of areas that have been removed down here, just like fine lines, fine hairs, that kind of thing. All right, and now we're going to move on to dodge and burn, and we're really going to do the bulk of the retouching using dodge and burn today. Michaela, the model, her skin is so good, so we really don't need to go overboard with the retouching at all today. Not that I would really go overboard with retouching, I feel, most of the time, and that's kind of like the mantra I like to live by. I think less is more. But as I said, I feel like we're going to be doing the bulk of this with using just a bit of light and dark with dodge and burn today, and really just kind of evening out parts of the skin tone that way. So we're going to start in this area down here, and we're going to start with using the dodge tool. Michaela's skin tone is considered more of a mid skin tone, so I'm going to use a really good combination of both dodge and burn. I'm not going to be using too much dodge because it's really going to lighten the skin tone overall, and I don't want that to happen. I think it's really about keeping the natural tone of the skin, but also adding that kind of summery warmth glow that I really wanted with the color grade afterwards. So we're going to start with that, and we're going to be using the dodge tool initially, but we are going to be using the burn tool in a lot of the mid-tones and some of the shadowed areas as well. So first off, I'm going to make sure that I've got the brush tool selected over here, the paintbrush tool. It's going to be a little bit smaller than this, so looking at the width over here, probably around about 70 pixels. And then we're going to make sure that the flow is at 1%, the opacity is at 100, and then we're going to make sure that we've got white selected over here. So you can just click the arrows. If you've got black and white there, just make sure that white is selected. And then we're going to begin painting onto some of the areas that just need a little bit of evening out here. So we're going to do this pretty light-handedly. And as I said, make sure to use a really good combination of both dodge and burn to make sure that you're not lightening the skin tone. And you're just evening out certain areas. So on some of these really dark areas just here, I'm using the dodge tool, but then I'm going to go to the burn layer, and then we're going to go over some of the lighter areas around that just to kind of even out the texture there. So you can kind of see what that's done. If I turn off those check boxes, this is what they've both done, just evening it up a little bit more. So I'm going to continue to do this with dodge and burn and start evening out some of the areas of the skin and make sure that we get a good combination of using both layers. And if you feel like you need to up the flow at any point, you can do so, and it will just sort of give a slightly heavier effect if that's what you're after. Okay, so now we've done most of our dodge and burn. So I'm just going to show you guys what that has actually done when we turn off the group layer. So we're just going to turn off dodge and burn, and you can see how that's just really evened out the skin tone overall. So this is the burn layer. I've used predominantly burn across a lot of the mid-tone areas and the darker shadows to preserve the skin tone. And then the highlights are kind of over the more highlighted areas or any kind of tricky areas that do need a little bit more evening out just in those spots. So we are pretty much done with our dodge and burn now. So now what we're going to move on to is just softening the texture in some of the areas just around the jawline and just some of the hairs that are kind of standing out in those particular spots. So what we're doing now is I've just created a new group layer, and we're going to rename this one Skin Texture. And I'm going to move this kind of like out of the dodge and burn group, and we are going to then create another blank layer and move that into the Skin Texture group. We're going to rename this one Clone Stamp. And in doing this, we're actually going to begin to soften the texture a little bit more. So to do this, we're going to go to the Clone Stamp tool just over here. We're going to make the brush a bit bigger, actually a lot bigger, making sure that it's still quite soft. And we're going to make sure that the opacity is at about 20-something% and the flow's at about 20-something% as well. We also need to make sure that we've got selected current layer and below for our sampling. So then I'm going to start to sample like you would in Photoshop around those areas and just start to paint over some of those more textured spots. So it's important to be light-handed with this tool because the skin can kind of start to look a little bit waxy if you go overboard. So we want to make sure that everything still looks pretty natural. Okay, so I want to show you guys what that has just done. So I'm going to turn the layer on and off, and you can see that it's just kind of just softened that texture in those particular areas. And now I think it's about time to move on to the color grade for the image. So to do this, we're going to create another group, and we're going to rename this one Color Grade. And then we're going to start creating some adjustment layers. So one of the ones that I'm going to show you guys to use is if we click down here, you can click on a layer called Recolor. And this one's really interesting because it's not really something that Photoshop has. You could probably get a similar effect, but it's more the blending mode that I quite enjoy using in Affinity Photos. So as I said, I want kind of a summery warm effect with this. Obviously we need to really bring down the saturation, but I really feel like picking a color that's kind of in the warm golds. And then we're going to choose the blending mode and put it as glow. So in also doing this, we're going to move down the opacity like we would in Photoshop if we were adding a layer. And we're going to move that right down and then just kind of like move it back up a little bit. And we're going to really see here what color looks best in terms of giving it that really nice golden effect. And I think something just around about this kind of area is good for now. I'm just going to bring down the saturation a little bit more, and I'm going to turn that on and off to see how it looks. So I think that gives a really nice depth to the image, and I really like using this particular tool in Affinity Photo. I'm just going to move that in under the color grade group because I haven't done that yet. And then I'm going to add a levels layer. Now I like to usually do this. Sometimes with dodge and burn, you can make an image look too even, especially across the skin tone. So on the levels adjustment layer I'm going to create, I'm going to just bump up the highlights a little bit more. So to do that, we'll just move the white level up just that bit more on this side, like that. And then we're going to go back to the adjustment layers here, and I'm going to go to selective color. Now, for me, I really like to adjust using the neutral section just down here because that tends to make a really big difference on skin. And we're going to just kind of like maybe add a little bit more yellow. Not too much with the cyan and magenta. We might Just kind of add a little bit more there. And now from now, I really don't want to affect the skin tone too much. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the blacks and whites here, and that's going to affect the shadows and the highlights of the image in terms of their coloring. So I'm just going to play around and see what kind of looks good in the shadows first. And I think something kind of like a blue tint kind of looks good. And then going back to the whites here, I'm gonna just try and see what kind of looks good there. I kind of like the contrast against the yellow tone, just something a little bit cooler in the highlight almost. Okay, and then I'm going to get a Vibrance Adjustment layer up. And we're just gonna move down the vibrance just a little bit. Let's say to about -6. And you can see it just kind of just dulls the tones a little bit just to fit in more with my style of photography and my style of editing. And we might even go back to levels, just adjust that midpoint of the gamma just to get a little bit less contrast. Now I'm going to take a snapshot and show you guys what we've done to the image. Okay, so going back to the original, this is the before, and then this is the after. So I'll go back again and show you guys the original. This is the before, and this is the after. So you can really achieve a lot in Affinity Photo, and like I said, I really do believe in the program. I think that it is very affordable for a lot of people out there who may be just starting out with photography, or even professionals that really want to switch up their editing program. I think it does have a lot of similar features to what Photoshop does have as well. Not everything, but it really does cover a lot when it comes to photo editing, and you can achieve a lot in the program overall. So guys, if you'd like me to do more tutorials on Affinity Photo, please let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to do more and more because I really do love the program. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell to see all the videos I have coming up in future. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!